Hello. There we go. Technology is such a wonderful thing. It's so helpful to all of us. It's great to see you this afternoon. Now, I got no introduction, and that's okay because I've been here before. I've had the privilege of speaking here to Bible studies throughout the last year, maybe 3 times or 4 times. I've been here on Sunday and preached before, and it's always an honor to be with the Church of Rochester. It's good to see you here this afternoon. My name is George Grace. I was the senior pastor at First Bible Baptist Church for 33 and a half years. I've been in the ministry now for about 47, done a lot of different things. I've been a Sunday school director, a youth pastor, a Bible Institute director, and an associate pastor, along with being a senior pastor, a president of a Bible Institute, and a president of a Christian Academy. Some of you may have heard of North Star Christian Academy. I was the president of North Star also while I was the senior pastor at First Bible Baptist. So a lot of different experiences in my life. Always an honor to be here with your pastor, his wife, and all of you people. Now, I'm going to get right into my message here today. I know that your pastor advertised on the internet because I saw this as I was scrolling through different people's Facebooks and whatnot, that I'm preaching on the passion of compassion. Now, frankly, that doesn't sound like a real exciting title to me. You know, I thought after I told Pastor David that this was what I was going to preach on, it is what I'm going to preach on, but the title isn't all that attractive. You know, if I was going to preach on today, I'm going to tell you when Jesus is going to come. See, if you believed me, and today I was going to tell you the second coming is going to take place on June 31st, and I'm going to tell you exactly when and where and all that stuff, we might have got 2 or 3 more people to come to church here today. But that would have been a lot more dynamic than saying the passion of compassion. But let me just say this. Oftentimes, when we preach a message, the first thing that we need to do as a pastor, as a preacher, as a teacher, is convince the hearer that they need to hear what you have to say. So let me try to do that. What I'm going to say here today applies to every person in this building. In fact, it applies to every person that's not in this building. That's a lot of people. That's over 7 billion people. Because what I'm going to talk about, when I talk about the subject of compassion, I'm going to be speaking about something that is very contrary to our human nature. We are not naturally compassionate people. Now, I'm going to define that for you if you're not sure what the word means. And I think you'll understand as we get into this just a little bit that we probably are not as compassionate as we could be. In fact, in my message, I'm going to tell you that there's basically 6 kinds of people in the world when it comes to this subject. I'm going to ask you to sit there and listen to my description of each kind of person, and I'm going to ask you to put yourself in one of those 6 categories. And it may be a little bit painful for you to do that. You'll see when I get there. But before I go any further, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story of 4 travelers. The first traveler in this story was me, was George Grace. This happened many, many years ago in another state, actually in the state of Tennessee. I might have even been in Kentucky. I'm not even sure. You'll understand why, not sure where I was in a moment. Years ago, I preached at a youth camp in Dayton, Tennessee. The head of that camp, owner, general manager, hired teenagers to work there during the summer. He hired one young man who he was trying to help. The young man had some real difficulties. He was struggling with rebellion and drugs. And well, this fella hired him to try to take him under his wing to give him a chance to rehabilitate himself, to turn himself around. Well, the young man found a car in that town that he wanted to buy, and the owner of the camp, or the manager of the camp, loaned the money to the young man to buy the car. Now, this car was a nice car. It was a Chevrolet Chevelle 1969 SS 396, what some people would call a muscle car, okay? Well, anyway, the arrangement with this young man did not work out, and he had to leave the camp. He was asked to leave. But the title of the car was put in the camp director's name, so he got to keep the car. He didn't want it, but he got to keep it. Now he had to get rid of it. Well, I showed up at the camp to be the speaker, and I saw that car, and I said, boy, that's nice. I said, how much you want to sell that for? He said, I'll sell it to you for $1,500. I thought that was crazy. Now, this is a long time ago. This wasn't last week. But this was a long time ago, and the car still was worth a lot more than $1,500. When he told me that, I said, well, I think I can come up with $1,500, and I did. So he let me drive the car all week long while I was there, just to make sure I really wanted it. And so we made a deal at the end of the week, and I was going to drive it from Dayton, Tennessee, back to Rochester, New York. That's about 800 miles, 800 miles. Now, the car still was somewhat old at this time and unproven. I'd only driven it a few miles that week, but it seemed like a very sound and solid car. Now, here's the story of the 4 travelers. I want you to know about the car so you'll understand a little bit more about the traveling. So on Friday night, I finished preaching, and I headed for Rochester, New York, headed for home en route right through Knoxville, Tennessee, and started going north on Route I-75 interstate. I'm cruising along around 12:30 in the morning, and things are going great. This 396 is it's going wonderful. And all of a sudden, no kidding, I'm going 70 miles an hour on I-75, and the car shut off. The lights went out, the dash lights went out, the engine shut off, everything shut down, and I rolled to a stop at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning on I-75 somewhere in Tennessee or Kentucky. I'm not even sure where I was. And I thought, oh no, am I in trouble? Now, I know a little bit about cars, but I didn't have any tools with me. Who knows what's wrong with this car that I just bought that I drove maybe 30 or 40 miles, and here I am in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, in a car that I have no idea what's wrong with it, and I'm sitting on the interstate. That's traveler number 1. That's me. Traveler number 2. Traveler number 2 could be just about anybody. Traveler number 2 is coming up behind me, and he sees my car stopped on the side of the road, and he goes right through me. He didn't stop. You would think for sure that he would have stopped for me. Of course, he probably didn't know who I was in the car, but he just cruised right by going 75 miles an hour. He didn't even look. That's traveler number 2. Traveler number 3 comes along. Traveler number 3, I can see in my rearview mirror as I'm sitting in the car, he's coming along, and what does he do? He moves to the outside lane, and he goes by me at 75 miles an hour. He doesn't even slow down either. Traveler number 3. Remember, I'm traveler number 1. Traveler number 2. Traveler number 2. 3. Traveler number 4 comes along. I'm sitting on the side of the road. It's 12:30, 1 o'clock, pitch black. I don't even know what state I'm in a car that won't run. I have no lights, no cell phone. This is the day when we didn't have cell phones like we do now. I had nothing, no means of communication, and I'm sitting in my car all by myself. I got about $25 in my pocket in a credit card. Traveler number 4 comes along. He comes up, he slows down. I look in my rear, and here comes a guy slowing down. He goes by me, and he pulls off the road. He gets out of the car, and he comes up to my car, and he says, "You having some trouble?" And I said, "Yeah." And I told him what happened. I'm going down the road. 70 miles an hour. Everything's wonderful. I've already driven 75 or 80 miles, and the car shuts off. Everything's gone. Lights are gone. Engine shuts off. No dash lights. No power in anything in the car. He said, let's go under your hood. So we go under the hood. We open up the hood. He looks in there, and he takes a little wrench, and he unscrews this thing. He goes back to his car. He pulls out a piece of sandpaper, and he sandpapers the body of my car where he took the screw out. He puts the screw back in and tightens it back up. He says, try it now. I get in the car. Boom! The car starts right up. Lights go on. You say, how long did this take? Just about as long as I'm telling this story. He didn't spend 2 minutes under the hood of my car. He pulled out one thing, sanded down the body of the car, screwed the grounding strap back into the body, and the car started, and I made my way home. And I thought, who is this guy? Who is this fella? This guy pulled off the side. He didn't know who I was in that car. I am essentially helpless. I'm going to walk to the next who knows what to make a phone call and try to get out of this thing. This guy pulls off the road. In 2 minutes, he gets under my hood. He fixes the problem. And when he's done, he says, there, that should work. I said, well, what can I do for you? I didn't have a lot of money. He said, don't worry about it, no problem. I said, can't I give you some money or something? And I did have a credit card, and I figured I could get home on my credit card. So I offered him $20, and he wouldn't even take it. He got in his car, and he drove away. You know what? I don't even think I asked him his name. It happened so fast. But somebody came along, stopped. I was in trouble. He must have felt like I was in trouble. And he fixed my problem in 2 minutes of his time, and he wouldn't even take any money to go on down the road. I'm traveler number 1. Traveler number 2. Traveler number 3. Traveler number 4 had compassion. He stopped for me. He didn't even know who I was. He didn't know what my problem was, and he cared enough to stop and was smart enough to fix my problem in 2 minutes, and I was on my way back to Rochester. Now let me ask you something. Does that story sound familiar to you? You know what that story is? Now, that's a true story about me, traveler number 1. But there's a story in the Bible that's just like that story. It's called the story of the Good Samaritan. Have you ever heard that one? The story of the Good Samaritan. Take your Bible this morning and go to Luke chapter number 10. Luke chapter number 10. The Passion of Compassion. The passion of compassion. Now, if you look at Luke chapter 10, a question is given to Jesus. Verse 25, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And based on that question, Jesus tells him the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, you can read down through here at your leisure, but you'll remember what happened. There was a guy who was on his way to Jericho. He ended up getting beaten and robbed by thieves and left for dead on the side of the road. Traveler number 1. Then traveler number 2 comes along. He's a priest or a Levite, one or the other, and he looks and he just goes on by. He doesn't stop. Traveler number 3 comes by, priest or Levi. He looks at him, and he goes on by, and he doesn't stop, and he doesn't do anything. But traveler number 4 comes along. He's a Samaritan. And of course, there's a story and a lesson just in the fact that he's a Samaritan. But I don't have the time to go into that right now. But traveler number 4 stops, and he sees this fella in trouble. He doesn't know if he's dead. He doesn't know what the problems are. But obviously, when you're laying in the side of the road, it's not a good place to stop and take a nap. So there's something wrong. So what he does, and the story tells us, notice in verse 33, it says, a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. Compassion. Compassion. This is an illustration. This is the second best illustration of compassion in all of the Bible. The best illustration is the compassion of Christ. When he went to the cross, he took our pain, our sin, our suffering, our hell upon himself, and he paid for it so you and I could go free. That's the most important act of compassion in all of the Bible. The story of the Good Samaritan, probably the second. Verse number 34, and he went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Now, I think this is important. This is important for the meaning of the word. The passion of compassion. The word compassion, the meaning of the word compassion, has changed in time. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But when we think of passion, oftentimes what we think of is romantic passion. A passion of a man with a woman and a woman with, that's what we think of passion. Or maybe you think of passion as a passion fruit. It's the name of a fruit. And we think of passion and we think of, heightened emotional feelings. Or maybe there's someone in here today who's passionate about football. You're going to get your dose of football later this afternoon, aren't you? But you're passionate about football. That means you really like it. You like to watch it. You like to play it. You like to be involved in football. You're passionate about it. Now, that's the way the term is used often today. But the meaning of the word passion really means that a person is willing to suffer and sacrifice himself or herself for someone else, as in the Passion of Christ. The Passion of Christ doesn't mean that he was passionate about watching football. It doesn't mean that he was passionately in love with some woman. It doesn't mean that he ate a fruit that was called a passion fruit, that he had this overwhelming desire and emotion for something. The Passion of Christ is a reference to the fact that Jesus took our pain and our suffering upon himself so you and I could go free, so we could go to heaven. He paid for our sin. That was his passion. That was his sacrifice. You understand the meaning of the word? The passion of compassion. So what is the passion of compassion? Before I answer the question, I mentioned 6 different kinds of people. Are you ready? It's time for you to put yourself in one of these categories or classifications. I'm going to start with the worst kind of person first, okay? The worst kind of person first. So most of you, well, at least half of you wouldn't I hope none of you would put yourself in this particular category. Category number 1. That is the type of person, and think of it in light of the story, my story of the 4 travelers on I-75, or the story of the Good Samaritan. The first person is a person who just lives in a perpetual fog. He or she just doesn't get it. He or she is just disengaged. Nothing going on around him phases him or her. They're just in a fog. They really don't know what's happening. And they don't even know they don't know what's happening. That's the worst kind of person. Now, if there are any people like that in here, you do not know that I am talking to you. That's how big of a fog you're in. See? You don't even know that you don't know. Hello? Smile at me. Just go ahead and smile. Because there's no one like that in here, is there? You're in such a fog, you don't even know that you don't know. Well, that's the first kind of person. The second kind of person is the hurtful type of person. Now, this type of person understands what's going on around them, but rather than looking at somebody laying in a ditch or a car off the side of the road, this person pours salt in the wound of the injured person. He goes by the guy laying in the ditch and he goes, and walks on, laughs at him, maybe cusses him, maybe makes fun of him, just adds insult to injury. Some people are like that. They like to see other people get hurt, particularly people that are better than them. Somebody who is wealthier or has more friends or is better looking, and that person gets in trouble and we go, good, it's about time they got in trouble. Do you ever think of that way? Do you ever think of someone that way? Do you ever think of somebody who was very wealthy and they died and you go, good, I'm glad they're dead? Nah, that's the hurtful type of person. There's the person who lives in a fog. He doesn't even know he doesn't know. And then there's the person who's the hurtful person. The hurtful person cannot rejoice in the successes and cannot weep for the problems of other people. He just rubs salt in the wounds. Hurtful people. Hurtful people. Number 3, the third kind of person is what I would call the apathetic person. Apathy. They just don't care. That was the two guys in the story of the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite. They just walked on by. They didn't show any emotion. They showed no care for this guy laying in the ditch. They just walked on by and said something in their mind like, too bad, so sad, that's the way the jungle rumbles or whatever. They didn't care at all. You're not like that, are you? In a fog. Hurtful. Number 3, apathetic, disengaged. You don't care about other people around you who may even be hurting. Number 4, sympathetic people. Apathy means no pathos. Sympathy means you have together pathos. In other words, you can come together with this person and feel for them. You send them a sympathy card. That means, I feel bad for you. Man, that's a bad situation. I feel bad for you. You're driving down the highway. You go by me. I'm sitting on the side of the road. My car doesn't run. You go by and you go, man, I feel bad for that guy there. He's on the side of the road in the middle of the night. He doesn't know where he is, where he's going. His car doesn't run. Boy, do I feel bad. He just feels bad. I'm not going to do anything about it. He just feels bad for me. So sad. That's sympathetic. Maybe you're that type of person. You look around at the world and you see all this pain and heartache and disappointment and depression, and you go, man, this world's a bad place. I really feel bad for all these people. But you never do anything about it. You never do anything about it. You just feel bad for people who have it bad. Then there's the empathetic. Number 5, empathy. Empathy is a little more powerful than sympathy. Empathy means I feel with you. Some of you may remember one of our previous presidents, he said this, I feel your pain. The empathetic person says, I feel your pain because I've been there myself. I've been there myself. I've gone through what you're going through. But I'm not going to do anything about it. It's too bad. I've been there. It's a bad place to be. Hope you get home sometime. I hope somebody gets you fixed up, gets rid of your wounds, binds up your wounds, and takes care of you. Empathy. Empathy. I feel your pain. That's the fifth type of person. The sixth type of person is the compassionate person. The compassionate person is different. He says, I understand your situation is a terrible situation. What I want to do is I want to help. How can I intervene? How can I do something that will make your life in this situation better than what it is right now? Let me give you a little example. We had a little snowstorm yesterday. Your next door neighbor, my next door neighbor, she fell and broke her leg 2 days ago. Fell and broke her leg in her driveway. She slipped in the driveway, fell and broke her leg. They took her to the hospital with her husband, took her to the hospital and all that. And I looked over there yesterday, and the snow was piling up in the driveway, and I knew the husband's going to have to come home. So I decided I'm going to go shovel their driveway for them. I can't fix a broken leg. I don't have a medical degree. I can't do that. But I can do something. Maybe I can shovel the driveway and help them that way. Maybe I could go visit this lady, my wife and I, we could go visit her in the hospital, see how she's doing and pray with her. See, there's things that we could do to show compassion. The empathetic person says, you know, I fell one time in my driveway and it sure hurts, but we don't do anything about it. You see the difference? The difference, the compassionate person says, how can I help alleviate your pain? How can I add value to you as an individual? The passion of compassion means this. Showing true compassion costs you something. Driving by at 70 miles an hour, pulling into the outside lane to avoid hitting me, thank you, but to avoid hitting me isn't really doing me a lot of good. Compassion says, or relieve you of your pain. That's what this story is all about. The young man asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? Of course, the answer to that question is the guy laying in the ditch is your neighbor. And you know how you're a good neighbor? You're a good neighbor when you pay a price, when you sacrifice of yourself to alleviate the pain of somebody else you know, or maybe you don't know. That's what compassion is all about. Compassion costs you something. Compassion is sacrifice. Compassion is showing mercy. Listen, I did not deserve this fella to pull off the road and fix my car in Kentucky or Tennessee or wherever I was. He didn't owe me anything. I don't even know his name. He didn't know my name. He didn't even know what my problem was, but he fixed it. All he had to do was stop his car. It cost him something. He had to think about me instead of himself. And he thought about the guy or whoever was sitting in that car. This is a bad place to be at 12:30 in the morning. Let's see if I can help. Let's see if I can help. That's the passion of compassion. The word compassion shows up in your English Bible about 40 times. So there's plenty of places to find the word and look for illustrations. It shows up about half of those times in the New Testament. And it means, the word compassion literally means to suffer with. Compassion. The word that the English word passion comes from means, it's a Latin word, it means to suffer. It's not just romantic feelings. It's not passion fruit. It's not being passionate about football. It means to suffer with another individual. That's what compassion means. That means this, that your problem that you're having right now, I will enter into your problem and I will become part of the solution to the problem that you have if I can. That's compassion. Now remember the 6 different kinds of people. Some people are in a fog. Some people are just hurtful people. Some people are apathetic. They just don't care about anybody else except themselves. Some people are sympathetic. They feel bad for people who are having difficult times, but they don't do anything about it. Some people are even empathetic. They say, man, I know your pain. I've been there myself, but I'm not going to do anything about yours. I had my own. You suffer through yours by yourself. The compassionate person says, I will suffer with you. I will suffer with you. That's what compassion is. It's not just a feeling. It's like love. Love is an action word. God so loved the world that he gave. Love promotes giving. Compassion promotes mercy and showing grace towards other individuals who don't deserve it. I didn't deserve somebody to stop and help me with my car. I didn't deserve that. But boy, am I glad somebody saw that I was in trouble and they cared for me. Thank you. Many, many years ago, I listened to a famous preacher, and I'll never forget his advice. He said, you know, when you're having problems in your life, go bake somebody a dozen cookies. I thought, huh? Is that good advice? Is that good counseling advice? What was he really saying? When you're having problems, go bake somebody else some cookies. Take your mind off your problems and help somebody else, and your problems will go away. There's a famous quotation that says something like this: if you want to help other people be happy, show compassion. In fact, if you want to be happy, show compassion. Happiness comes when people are compassionate people, and they're willing to sacrifice and suffer with other people for their benefit. Compassion is the expenditure of your resources for the good of another individual. Giving. When we put money in the offering plate and we're giving to a cause, maybe to a missionary or whatever it might be, what we are doing is we're showing compassion. We're saying, I will give of myself, I will expend my resources to help somebody else who has a problem or a need. That's compassion. Every time you put money in an offering plate or help somebody, help a little old lady across the street, what you're doing is you're showing compassion. But the term implies sacrifice and cost. Compassion is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate their pain. Do you care for other people? You see why this is a message that really addresses all human beings, because we are naturally self-absorbed. We are naturally selfish. We are naturally prideful and arrogant. And I'm number one. You're number 2, 3, 4, but I'm number 1. We are very self-centered people. So when we talk about compassion and caring for other people, it goes against the grain of our human nature. This is a tough sermon. Now, you're sitting there, you look good, but I don't know what's going on in your mind right now. I don't know what's going on in your heart right now. Maybe you're in a fog. You don't even know that you don't know. Maybe you're one of those hurtful people. You look at other people who've got problems and you laugh at them and mock them and make fun of them, and you're glad they got problems. Or maybe you're just, sympathetic. You show sympathy, or even before that, you show nothing, apathy, or you show sympathy, or maybe every now and then you say, yeah, I've been there, I understand, but we do nothing about the problems of other people around us when we have resources to do something. And then there's the compassionate person. The compassionate person is the Good Samaritan. He's the good neighbor. He's the person that sees other people's problems, and he's willing to inject or interject himself into the situation to make it better. Now, I'm almost done here, but I want you to look at the text one more time at the story. Look at the story. Verse number 33 says that he came where he was. Now, I think you see that phrase? He came where he was. Now, this is important because you can't solve all of the problems of the whole world. You can't do it. You don't have enough resources. But you can help solve the problems where you are. Where you are. Right now, where you are. Your family, your friends, people in your church. Maybe you know somebody who's going through a very difficult time and they need help. You can show compassion right where you are. You can't save the world. You can't finance all the food for all the people that need to eat in all the world, or the medical care, or the housing, or anything else. You can't do that. So stop thinking that's what I'm telling you to do. But you can make a difference where you are. You can be compassionate where you are. And I believe this. I believe that God brings certain people into our lives to test us, to give us an opportunity to be Christ to that individual and show love, and to show it in an action way by giving. So you can't save the world, but you can make a difference where you are. And it says in verse 34 that he went to him. Sometimes we may have to step out a little bit. Step out. Sometimes you might say, I got some extra money here. Pastor, do you know somebody that has a need that I could help? I got $100 here. Can I buy some groceries for somebody? Could you do that and show compassion towards somebody else? Think about it. That's being a good neighbor. That's showing compassion. It says that he went to him. And then this is what he did. Here's the cost. He bound him up. He set him on his beast. He brought him to an inn. He took care of him. He enlisted others to get involved. He paid the innkeeper's bill. And then he followed up the next day and made sure that he had done everything he could do to help that person. That's compassion. That's the passion of compassion. That's what I'm talking about. Real compassion costs you something. And then verse number 37 says this, that he showed mercy. The Bible equates showing mercy in this story, it's not always true, but it is true in this story, equates showing mercy with compassion. Showing mercy is compassion. How do we define mercy? Love that responds to human need in an unexpected and an unmerited way. You just show up, you come on the scene, unannounced, no fanfare, and you say, I am here to help. I'm here to make things better. What can I do to add value to this particular situation? How can I help this individual? It may be your brother. It may be your child. It may be your next door neighbor. It may be somebody while you're driving down the interstate that's sitting on the side of the road with a broken down car. How can I help this individual? Jesus Christ is the primary example of what compassion is all about. Compassion means to suffer together. And everybody in this room fits in one of these categories. You're in a fog. You don't even know that you don't know. You're hurtful. You rejoice and laugh at the problems of other people. You're apathetic. You don't care about anybody else. You only care about yourself. You're sympathetic. You care, but you're not going to do anything about it. I not only care, number 5, but I've been there before. I know what it's like to be in your situation. I was out on the highway, blah, blah, I understand. However, I'm not going to do anything about it. And then number 6, you get